April after 10th, 2024, 9:15 in the morning. Inside a secured government building in Brussels, Belgium, 7 of the most powerful finance ministers in the world sit around a mahogany conference table. The room is sealed. No cameras are allowed, no journalists are present, no public record will be kept of what's about to be discussed. These are the finance ministers of the G7 nations: the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, Canada, and Japan. Together, they control more than half of the world's wealth. On the agenda today is not your inflation, not your rising rent, not your stagnant wages or unaffordable housing. On the agenda is what to do with $300 billion US dollars that doesn't belong to them. This money belongs to Russia's central bank. Since February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that $300 billion has been frozen, locked inside Western financial institutions. It sits in Euroclear in Belgium, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and the Bank of England in London. The money still exists. It hasn't been destroyed. It hasn't disappeared. It simply cannot be accessed by the country that owns it. With a single coordinated decision, these 7 people have the power to freeze, redirect, seize, or repurpose $300 billion without a single bullet being fired. And here's the question that should terrify you. If the most powerful governments in the world can simply press pause on $300 billion, what does that say about the money sitting in your bank account right now? If money can be frozen, redefined, or made worthless at the highest levels of global finance, how solid is the paycheck you worked 40 hours this week to earn? What happens when the rules change overnight, and your savings, your pension, your entire financial life is suddenly subject to decisions made in rooms you'll never enter? And here's the deeper question nobody asks. If this can happen to a country with nuclear weapons and vast natural resources, what stops it from happening to you? At the exact same moment this meeting is taking place in Brussels, in cities across the world, New York, London, Tokyo, Karachi, Lagos, Sydney, Sao Paulo, ordinary people are waking up to a very different reality. The alarm goes off. Another day begins. Rent is due in 5 days. The credit card balance that was supposed to be paid off last month has grown again. Groceries that cost $80 2 years ago now cost $120. The gas tank that used to fill for $40 now takes $65. Your salary went up 3% last year, but everything else went up 8%. You're working the same hours, maybe more. You're doing everything right, showing up, paying bills, saving what you can. And yet, somehow, you're falling further behind every single month. According to official government data, inflation peaked in 2022 and is now under control. But walk into any grocery store, any apartment complex, any car dealership, and you'll see the truth. Life never got cheaper again. In the United States, inflation hit 9.1% in June 2022, the highest rate in over 40 years. Wages did go up, but not nearly enough. In real terms, actual purchasing power, most American workers took a pay cut between 2021 and 2024. In Pakistan, the rupee collapsed from around 105 rupees per US dollar in 2013 to over 280 rupees per dollar by 2024. Middle-class families watched decades of savings evaporate. A car that cost 2 million rupees in 2015 now costs 8 million. Retirement plans became worthless overnight. In the United Kingdom, energy bills doubled in a single year. In Canada, the average home price crossed $1.1 million Canadian dollars, while wages remained stuck in place. In Turkey, inflation exceeded 80% in 2022. In Argentina, it surpassed 200% in 2023. Everywhere you look, the pattern is identical. Work harder, earn more on paper, fall further behind in reality. And here's what makes this so insidious. Most people blame themselves. They think, I should have studied something more practical. I should have invested in Bitcoin when it was $100. I should have bought real estate 10 years ago. I'm just not disciplined enough. I don't work hard enough. I made bad choices. But what if that story, the story you've been telling yourself, is completely wrong? What if the problem isn't your effort, your intelligence, or your decisions? What if the real problem is the system your effort flows into? What if the game was rigged from the start and nobody ever told you the rules? Modern finance doesn't just move money around. It decides who gets ahead and who stays stuck. It rewards ownership over labor. It rewards assets over income. It rewards leverage over savings. It rewards those born into wealth over those trying to build it. And the rules governing this system weren't written yesterday. Many of them trace back to August 15, 1971, when President Richard Nixon made a decision that changed the world forever. On that day, Nixon announced that the United States would abandon the gold standard. For the first time in human history, the world's reserve currency would be backed by nothing but government policy and debt. Money stopped being a store of value and became a tool of policy. Since that moment in 1971, global debt has exploded from $1 trillion to over $307 trillion, more than 3 times the entire world's annual economic output. That's not a typo. The world owes more than 3 years' worth of everything it produces. And that debt doesn't just disappear. It sits on balance sheets. It accrues interest. It quietly demands payment from future labor. Your children's labor, your grandchildren's labor. This is the uncomfortable truth that nobody explains in school, nobody tells you at your job, nobody mentions on your bank's glossy website with smiling families and promises of financial freedom. The financial system you live under was not designed to make everyone wealthy. It wasn't designed to reward hard work equally. It wasn't designed to give everyone a fair shot. It was designed to keep the system liquid, stable, and profitable for those closest to the flow of capital. When you understand this, truly understand it, everything starts to make sense. Why inflation always seems to punish savers while rewarding debtors and asset owners. Why your wages never quite keep up with the cost of living. Why debt feels inescapable no matter how hard you try to pay it down. Why billionaires can borrow $500 million at 2% interest and pay zero taxes while you're taxed on every single paycheck. Why housing prices keep rising even when it makes no mathematical sense. Why education was supposed to be the ticket to success, but instead became a trap. None of this is accidental. None of this is random. It is structural. It is by design. And once you see it, truly see it, you can't unsee it. In this video, we're going to break down 7 shocking ways modern financial systems quietly, systematically keep people stuck, not through conspiracy theories or shadowy cabals, but through incentives, rules, mathematics, and structural design. This isn't about fear. This isn't about giving up. This is about clarity. Because the moment you understand how the system actually works is the moment you stop blaming yourself. It's the moment you stop feeling like a failure. And it's the moment you start asking better questions. So let me ask you, are you ready to see how the game really works? Are you ready to understand why working harder doesn't seem to get you ahead anymore? Are you ready to stop blaming yourself and start seeing the system for what it is? Then let's begin. The first way the financial system keeps people stuck is through inflation. And it's the most invisible, most insidious, most powerful wealth transfer mechanism ever created. Inflation is usually explained as prices going up, but that definition hides the real damage. Inflation doesn't just make things more expensive. It steals the value of your past labor. Think about it this way. If you saved $10,000 in 2020, that money could buy a certain amount of goods and services. By 2024, that same $10,000 buys significantly less. You didn't spend it. You didn't lose it. You didn't make a bad investment. The value was simply taken from you, silently, invisibly, without your permission. In June 2022, inflation in the United States reached 9.1%, the highest level in over 40 years. The government called it a temporary shock caused by supply chain disruptions and the pandemic. But everyday life told a very different story. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, rent increased by more than 20% between 2020 and 2024. In Miami, rent increased by over 30%. Grocery prices rose month after month after month. A dozen eggs that cost $1.50 in 2019 cost over $4 in 2023. Ground beef went from $3.50 per pound to $6 per pound. Bread, milk, chicken, rice, everything went up. Energy costs surged. Electricity bills doubled in some states. Heating costs became unaffordable for millions. Meanwhile, average wage growth remained stuck around 4% to 5%. So yes, you got a raise. Your paycheck went from $50,000 to $52,000. Congratulations. But your rent went from $1,100 to $2,500. Your groceries went from $400 per month to $600. Your car insurance went from $1,200 per year to $1,800. You earned more numbers on paper, but you have less real purchasing power. You're poorer than you were before, even though your salary went up. That's inflation. And here's what makes it so devastating. Inflation acts like a tax that never needs approval. It never appears on a ballot. No politician has to vote for it. No law has to be passed. It just happens. And it hits hardest those who depend on cash income and savings. If your wealth is tied to a monthly paycheck, if you live paycheck to paycheck, inflation slowly, steadily erodes your standard of living. But if your wealth is tied to assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, inflation often increases their value. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine 2 people in 2020. Person A has $100,000 in cash savings. Person B has $100,000 in stocks. By 2024, Person A's $100,000 in cash can buy maybe $75,000 worth of goods due to inflation. Person B's $100,000 in stocks is now worth $150,000 because stock prices rose with inflation. Same starting point, completely different outcomes. This creates a silent, invisible divide between asset owners and everyone else. The rich get richer, not because they're smarter or work harder, but because inflation is designed to reward assets and punish cash. And here's the kicker. Central banks do this intentionally. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, they all target around 2% inflation per year. They claim this encourages spending and investment. But what it really does is force you to spend or invest, because holding cash is a guaranteed loss. Over decades, even mild 2% inflation compounds into massive wealth destruction. $10,000 saved in 2000 is worth about $6,500 in purchasing power today. You lost $3,500 without spending a dime. Inflation doesn't feel like theft because there's no robber, no gun, no broken window. But mathematically, it is the largest wealth transfer mechanism in modern finance. It transfers wealth from savers to debtors, from workers to asset owners, from the poor to the rich, and it does so invisibly every single day. The second way the system traps people is through debt, specifically how money is created through lending. Most people believe that when you take out a loan, the bank is lending you money that already exists. They imagine a vault somewhere with cash, and the bank takes some of that cash and lends it to you. That's not how it works. In modern finance, banks create money the moment they issue a loan. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is legal, documented, and central to how the financial system operates. When you walk into a bank and take out a $300,000 mortgage, the bank doesn't reach into a vault and pull out $300,000. It types numbers into a computer. It creates $300,000 in digital money and deposits it into the seller's account. That money didn't exist before. It exists now because you promised to repay it with interest. The bank created money out of nothing, and now you owe them $300,000 plus interest. This is called fractional reserve banking, and it's how the entire system works. But here's the critical part that almost nobody understands. Only the principal is created, not the interest. Let me explain. You borrow $300,000 for a home at 5% interest over 30 years. By the time you're done paying, you will have paid nearly $580,000. That's $300,000 in principal and $280,000 in interest. But when the bank created your loan, it only created $300,000. The extra $280,000 doesn't exist yet. So where does it come from? It comes from somewhere else in the economy, usually from other people going into debt, or from future economic growth, or from money printing by central banks. This creates a system that mathematically requires continuous borrowing to function. If everyone tried to pay off their debt at the same time, there wouldn't be enough money in existence to do it. The system would collapse. On a global scale, this is why total debt surpassed $307 trillion by 2023. It's not because people are irresponsible. It's because the system requires ever-increasing debt to survive. On a personal level, this means you're trapped in a cycle where money is always slightly out of reach. You can work harder, save more, and make smart decisions, but the game is designed so that debt is always necessary. And if you miss even one payment, penalties accelerate instantly. Banks earn interest regardless of economic conditions. If the economy is booming, they profit. If the economy collapses, borrowers default, and banks get bailed out by governments. Borrowers absorb all the risk. Banks absorb none. Debt is marketed as opportunity. Buy a house, start a business, get an education. But structurally, debt transfers stability upward and pressure downward. The system doesn't collapse when individuals fail. Individuals collapse to protect the system. The third mechanism keeping people stuck is taxation. And more importantly, who gets taxed and when? If you earn money through labor, through a job, through your time and effort, taxation is immediate and unavoidable. Before you even see your paycheck, income tax is deducted, then payroll tax for Social Security and Medicare, then state and local taxes. Then, when you spend what's left, sales tax. A worker earning $60,000 per year in the United States can easily lose 20% to 25% of their income to taxes before they buy a single thing. But if your wealth grows through assets, through stocks, real estate, private companies, the rules change completely. Wealth stored in assets is not taxed until it's sold. These are called unrealized gains. And here's where it gets truly insane. Between 2014 and 2018, Jeff Bezos' net worth increased by roughly $99 billion. In those same 4 years, he paid $93 million in federal income taxes. Do the math. $93 million on $99 billion is an effective tax rate of less than 1%. You, earning $50,000 or $80,000 or $120,000, pay a higher tax rate than one of the richest men in the world. And this isn't a loophole. This isn't tax evasion. This is the system working exactly as designed. The wealthy don't sell their assets. Instead, they borrow against them. A billionaire with $10 billion in Amazon stock can walk into Goldman Sachs and say, "I'd like to borrow $500 million. The bank says, "Sure, use your stock as collateral. We'll give you a loan at 2% interest." Now the billionaire has $500 million in cash to spend, and they pay zero income tax on it because borrowed money isn't income. Meanwhile, you cannot borrow against your future wages without paying interest, fees, and taking on massive risk. Governments rely heavily on taxing labor because labor is fixed, visible, and easy to track. Wealth, on the other hand, is mobile, complex, and protected by layers of accountants, lawyers, and offshore structures. Over time, this tax imbalance concentrates power. It becomes easier to stay rich than to become rich. The fourth trap is asset inflation, and it's why your parents could buy a house on one income while you can barely afford rent on two. Asset prices, particularly housing and stocks, have risen far, far faster than wages for decades. In Toronto, Canada, the average home price was around $273,000 in the year 2000. By 2023, it crossed $1.1 million. That's a 300% increase. During that same period, median household income went from about $55,000 to $78,000, a 40% increase. Housing went up 300%. Income went up 40%. The gap is mathematically impossible to close through work alone. In London, average home prices exceeded $530,000 while wages stagnated. In Sydney, Melbourne, San Francisco, New York, the story is identical, and it's not just housing. Since the 2009 financial crisis, the S&P 500 stock index has risen more than 480%. If you owned stocks in 2009, your wealth quintupled. But here's the problem. Ownership of these assets is heavily concentrated. The top 10% of households own about 89% of all stocks. The bottom 50% own almost nothing. So when markets rise, the benefits flow almost entirely to those who already have wealth. If you're trying to save for a down payment, the target keeps moving. You save $20,000, but by the time you've saved it, the house you wanted now costs $50,000 more. You're running on a treadmill that's speeding up. The system rewards early access and inherited advantage, not discipline alone. Asset inflation creates a moving finish line where effort stays constant but outcomes drift further and further away. People aren't failing to catch up. The game is accelerating without them. The fifth trap is education debt, the lie that was supposed to set you free but instead became a chain. For decades, society told young people, go to college, get a degree, you'll get a good job, you'll be successful. And for a while that was true. But then something changed. Education became financialized. It became a profit center. Tuition costs exploded while state funding collapsed. By 2024, total student loan debt in the United States reached $1.77 trillion. The average borrower owes around $37,000, often before they've earned their first full paycheck. And here's the truly cruel part. Unlike credit card debt, business debt, or even gambling debt, student loans are nearly impossible to discharge in bankruptcy. You can lose your house, your car, your business, and declare bankruptcy. But student loans follow you until you die. So graduates enter the workforce already drowning. In cities like New York, entry-level salaries average $55,000 per year. Monthly student loan payments can easily exceed $500. That's $6,000 per year, just to service debt before you've built anything. This delays everything: buying a home, investing, starting a business, starting a family. Education debt locks people into survival mode instead of strategic thinking. Instead of creating freedom, it narrows choices. The system shifted risk from institutions to individuals while keeping all the profit. The sixth mechanism is currency devaluation, and it's why saving money feels pointless in much of the world. In Pakistan, the rupee was around 105 per US dollar in 2013. By 2024, it collapsed to over 280 per dollar. If you had saved 1 million rupees in 2013, it could buy a decent car. By 2024, that same 1 million rupees couldn't even buy a used motorcycle. Your money didn't disappear. Its value was destroyed. In Turkey, inflation exceeded 80% in 2022. In Argentina, it surpassed 200% in 2023. When currency loses value, savings evaporate, imported goods become unaffordable, and the middle class is wiped out. Governments justify devaluation as necessary, but the cost is never shared equally. Those with assets in foreign currencies, real estate, or businesses survive. Those holding cash lose purchasing power every single day. Saving, once considered responsible and virtuous, becomes a trap. Currency devaluation punishes discipline and rewards leverage, reinforcing inequality over time. The seventh and final way the system keeps people stuck is by reserving its most powerful strategies for the already wealthy. One of the most effective is called buy, borrow, die. Here's how it works. A billionaire buys $100 million in appreciating assets, stocks, real estate, art, businesses. Instead of selling those assets and paying capital gains tax, they borrow against them. They take out a $30 million loan using the assets as collateral. They live off that $30 million paying zero income tax because loans aren't taxable. When they die, their heirs inherit the assets with what's called a step-up in basis. This means the original purchase price is erased and the new basis becomes the current market value. All those decades of gains, untaxed, vanished. The heirs can sell immediately and pay zero capital gains tax, or they can repeat the cycle, borrow, live, die, pass it on. This strategy is legal, common, and completely inaccessible to ordinary people. You can't do this because you don't have $100 million in assets to use as collateral. You can't access private banking relationships that offer 2% interest rates. You can't hire estate planners and tax attorneys to structure everything perfectly. The rules are public, but access is restricted. This is not a conspiracy. It's structural design. The system doesn't break. It filters. And understanding that is the first step toward navigating it instead of being crushed by it. So here's where we are. You've just learned 7 ways modern financial systems quietly, systematically keep people stuck. Inflation silently steals your purchasing power. Debt traps you in a cycle where money is always just out of reach. Taxation hits labor immediately while wealth grows untouched. Asset inflation makes it impossible to catch up no matter how hard you work. Education debt turns opportunity into a decades-long obligation. Currency devaluation destroys savings and punishes discipline. And the most powerful wealth-building strategies are reserved for those who already have millions. Now, you might be thinking, this is depressing. What's the point? But here's the truth. Knowledge is power. The moment you understand how the system works, you stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking you failed. You stop believing the lie that you just didn't work hard enough. You see the game for what it is. And when you see the game, you can start playing it differently. You start asking better questions. How can I protect my purchasing power against inflation? How can I use debt strategically instead of being used by it? How can I shift from earning income to owning assets? How can I access the strategies the wealthy use? How can I protect my wealth across currencies? How can I think in decades instead of paychecks? This isn't about fear. It's about clarity. It's about refusing to play a rigged game by the rules they gave you. The system doesn't owe you fairness. It never promised you success. But once you understand it, truly understand how money moves, how wealth flows, how power concentrates, you can navigate it. You can make smarter decisions. You can protect what you've built. You can stop being stuck. So don't just watch this video and forget it. Don't just nod along and go back to doing the same things. Take action. Learn the rules. Think in assets, not income. Protect your time like it's your most valuable resource, because it is. Plan with strategy, not hope. And understand that the system doesn't break for individuals. Individuals break trying to hold up a system that was never designed for them to win. But when you stop trying to hold it up and start navigating it, everything changes. You stop being a victim of the system. You become someone who understands it. And that understanding is the first step toward freedom. The moment you see the game clearly, you stop playing by default. You start playing intentionally, you take control, and you win on your own terms.